Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 5th of May, 2023, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen, as usual, for Friday. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
And also from Damascus by video link, we've got Vanessa Beeley joining us as well. Now, we're going to get kicked off here with all-cause mortality because, this came out on Wednesday. The latest ONS statistics on mortality in the UK. If we look on the right-hand side, again, we've got this massive spike in excess mortality. This is what the Office for National Statistics had to say. The number of deaths registered in the UK in the week ending 21st of April 2023, week 16, was 14,024, which is 22.1% above the 5-year average. It's quite an incredible situation. Let's just look at what the mainstream press said about this. That's it.
Shocking.
Okay. So in the meantime, what have we got? We've got, this is going back a few months, but nonetheless, full fact, no evidence for a rise in sudden deaths or that COVID-19 vaccines are the cause. And then we've got from New Scientist here, there are thousands more UK deaths than usual, and we don't know why. So here we are. We had massive excess mortality all the way through 2022. We're now in a process of excess mortality and all running into the summer of 2023 as well. Nobody seems to care. The mainstream media isn't talking about it every day, it seems, Patrick, and this might be purely anecdotal, but every day it seems there's another report of some well-known personality that has dropped dead at the age of 30 or 40 or 50 suddenly. Total silence, but we've got the censorship industrial complex there, dismissing out of hand any questions about why this is happening.
Well, the fact checkers say there's nothing to see, so it must be climate change, Mike.
Well, indeed, yes. Okay. Now, it's not just in the UK either. And we've talked in the past about the fact that this is happening in Europe as well. But so I just wanted to bring Canada on screen here. And in this case, excess deaths in Nova Scotia recently hit peak since start of COVID-19 pandemic. And this is what it says just under this little video here. Statistics Canada tracks excess mortality, the number of actual deaths above what's expected. The last time Nova Scotia had a week where the numbers were lower than what would normally be anticipated was in May 2022. So they have not had below average excess mortality since May 2022, and yet nobody asking any questions. This is a global problem, or at least I'm going to say it's not a global problem. It's a problem, it seems, that is in the countries that mostly distributed vaccinations. That's just a suggestion. We don't know the answer to that yet, but nobody's really investigating it. So there's a bit of a vacuum there.
Well, you got to look at the independent variables, Mike, globally, and what are the variables that are common amongst all those countries, as you said. Massive experimental jab rollout.
Yes.
So who knows?
Let's move on to the other news today. And of course, the mainstream press, this is their top story. Thank you for voting, said the Conservatives this morning. In fact, the question is how many people did vote? Well, not very many, 32% turnout. Now, this is, I suppose, fairly normal for local elections. Last year, I think it was 33%. 2021 was about 36, 37%, something like that. But it seems like the results are not going well for Rishi Sunak or the Tory party. This was his comment this morning. I'm disappointed. They're panicking that they're losing the blue wall, as it were. I mean, I don't think there's any more to say about this. It's not as if the Labour Party or the Liberal Democrat Party are offering anything better. It looks like there are more independents being voted for this time, which is always a positive development.
Just remember, the wall's not actually blue, Mike. It's a coat of paint.
Yes.
So it's something underneath it that could come out at any moment.
Indeed. Yeah. Now let's come on to the story that was just breaking while the UK Column News was on Wednesday, and that, of course, is the Kremlin drone attack.
So yeah, the massive story. Most people have probably seen this. So apparently they're calling it, the Russians are calling it a potential assassination attempt against Vladimir Putin, the Senate residency, which is the second residency of the president. And supposedly, according to Dmitry Peskov and others, the spokespeople in the Kremlin, Putin was not there. when these two small drones came, and I think it was two, and a small explosion here, and they say they thwarted half of the attack, apparently. So who knows what actually happened. What's interesting about this is, and you have to be wary that the Kiev regime has been issuing all sorts of threats and hitting targets inside Russia, including one of the officials in Kiev 3 days before this put up a tweet offering a $500,000 reward for anybody that could do a drone attack ahead of the Victory Day parade. So the timing of this is, of course, very symbolic, right before Victory Day, which I believe is May the 9th, which commemorates the Soviet troops marching in Berlin for victory. So let's take a closer look here at this story and see, well, here's the footage we have, one angle here, and so we'll see, apparently, there's a detonation there, and and from a different angle there as well. So there's a few different pieces of video footage that are circulating on this from Russian media and also on Telegram, Twitter, and in the mainstream media as well. You can see the embers burning there on the dome. So we'll see what else we have here. Look, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. saying Russia announced today that the Kremlin has been attacked by armed drones, presumably from Ukraine. Imagine how we would respond if Russian-backed forces or anyone launched a drone attack or drone strike on the Capitol. We must stop these deranged attempts to escalate the war. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the only politician in the race for 2024 that's commented on this story, which is shocking in itself. And I just want to say quickly, what if a firecracker or an M80 went off on the White House lawn, or a drone tried to drop a quarter stick of dynamite or something like that? The whole country would go into lockdown. There would be 9/11 rhetoric starting to circulate, and total hysteria in the mainstream media. That's how America would react for a firecracker. So just bear that in mind. Good to hear that from RFK. And just also on the day that this was announced, the day after, the Kiev post office, the National Post Office, launched this commemorative stamp of the Kremlin on fire. You could say this is bad taste, or is this just an outright provocation?
Well, the question is, how did they generate that artwork quite so quickly?
Maybe an AI app or something like that, maybe. But they were very quick off the mark on this. So, I mean, that's kind of suspect as well. So, again, the Western conversation is about false flags. They're saying it couldn't have been Ukraine. It had to have been a Russian false flag. And I think we have a video from a U.S. Local affiliate news program where he's just struggling over which angle to take on this story. It has to be anything except for Ukraine actually doing it. Roll this clip.
So, who could be behind it? Experts have three theories here. They say it could be a resistance group within Russia, could be a false flag operation by Putin's own government to justify more attacks on Ukraine, or it could be a warning shot from Ukrainian forces. President Zelensky denies that, and Senator Warner seems to agree after meeting with the head of the CIA.
The committee expressed, whatever intel we get, we need to hear it as soon as possible from the agency director.
So that's very interesting, because that immediately makes me, so we've got the stamp issue, and now we've got common narratives building, right? So let's just have a look at a minute or so of an interview that Nigel Farage did yesterday with Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. And we're going to hear that his story is exactly the same. So the question is this rapid reaction mechanism back in operation here? Because this sounds like a common narrative on both sides of the Atlantic. Let's have a listen to this.
But I don't know. But somebody perhaps with a better idea than me is Colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, OBE, former commander of the 1st Royal Tank Regiment. Hamish, great to have you back on the show. What do you make of the events that took place at the Kremlin yesterday?
Well, I think it's absolute hogwash and bunkum that Russia is claiming that it's the US or the Ukraine responsible. Why would they do it? Why would they tempt Russia to escalate? And the Russians have said for some time they're going to escalate, they're going to go nuclear. Where is the tail fin of that drone with a Stars and Stripes banner on it? There are two other more likely explanations. You've mentioned the Russian false flag. That would be plausible. That would then give Putin an excuse to escalate into some form. The third likelihood is that it's Russian separatists. There are a lot of very hacked off Wagner Group criminals who don't think much of Putin these days. And there is a growing surgence of people in Russia who want to see the end of Putin.
So this idea of separatists being possibly behind it as well. So anyway.
That was an amusing clip. I really enjoyed that.
Well, look, just before we move on, I just because I'd like to get a little bit of context in Hamish de Bretton-Gordon just briefly. Vanessa, what's your experience with him?
Well, I mean, he's the wheel out, isn't he? He's the group of I think there's three former military, and of course, James Le Mesurier was one of them, who were wheeled out, most of them, by the way, with Jersey or Guernsey family names, which is an interesting little fact there. But throughout the Syria conflict, of course, he was wheeled out as the so-called chemical weapons expert, despite informing us that our fridges were a threat to us because they can basically be converted into bombs. I mean, he's the epitome of a chinless wonder that is a mouthpiece for intelligence agencies and the UK FCO, particularly in Syria, as I said, connected to the chemical weapons narratives, also connected to our dear friend Dr. Knott, of course, who started the whole ball rolling about Syrian Arab Army atrocities in Syria. All of them work together with Toby Cadman, another name that people might recognize in Medics Under Fire. So, you know, he's a well-known face in the narrative management team.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Britain's own WMD specialist.
Yes.
So the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, that was another false flag. I mean, you remember when that happened, and immediately the default position in Western media and politics is, must be the Russians. They must have blown up their own pipeline. So it's the automatic reflex in the West is, Russians have done it to themselves. Pretty much anything of substance that happens, that's the blame game immediately. So
yes.
It's disingenuous on many levels. We'll show you a pattern of terrorist attacks inside Ukraine in a minute, but we should just not underestimate the seriousness of this situation here. New York Times: the U.S. is wiring Ukraine with radiation sensors to detect nuclear blasts, not just bombs, but also dirty bombs. And get this, Mike, they're able to attribute blame with these new high-tech.
Oh, are they?
Yes, indeed they are. So let's look at this. The United States is wiring Ukraine with sensors all over the country that can detect bursts of radiation from nuclear weapons to a dirty bomb and confirm the identity of the attacker. Isn't that great?
That's incredible.
That's the top-end AI systems here, Mike, so we don't need the OPCW anymore. In part, the goal is to make sure that the Russians, if Russia detonates a radioactive weapon on Ukrainian soil, its atomic signature and Moscow's culpability would be verified. So this just precludes that anybody else could have possibly set off a dirty bomb.
Sorry, but correct me if I'm wrong. Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, and in fact, most of the nuclear material, or at least a significant proportion of it, was managed by Ukraine. Yeah. During the Soviet time. So is it unlikely that Ukraine would have material that had a similar signature or identical signature to Russian material?
Very likely. Or as they say in the intelligence community, highly likely. So you're right, Mike. Very well spotted there. So it's just ridiculous when you think about this, but they're setting up the narrative that if Putin's backed into a corner, he'll use a tactical nuke. You've heard all this, right? Mm-hmm. Even though Russia hasn't ever used a tactical nuke in the field, this is seen as some law of warfare now that Putin will use a tactical nuke. So you can see the whole narrative is being set up here. Now on the drone attack here, this is the U.S. ambassador, or the Russian ambassador in the United States, Anatoly Antonov, and he's saying the U.S. Lacks the guts to condemn the drone attack on the Kremlin. Now notice this is true. No Western leaders have condemned this attack. So immediately they don't have to because they default to the Russian false flag theory. This is how crazy the environment is right now around this conflict here. But look at this. Let's put some context on this. This is the second overnight drone incident at Russian refinery. So in the Rostov region, we've had 2 kamikaze drone terrorist attacks. What else can you call them but terrorist attacks against civilians and against civilian infrastructure? Kiev is basically stum on this, but it seems to be obviously coming from Ukraine. But here, look at this. They're canceling the Victory Day parade celebrations in some cities. And there's no-fly zones along major cities for any drone at all in the sky. So these are the various locations you can see on this map. Sevastopol, April 29th. Volna, May 3rd. Ilsky, May 4th. Novoshakshenk, we go back, on May 4th, and Stavropol on May 4th. So you can see a pattern of these sort of what the West would call terrorist attacks, but they don't have a name for them yet because they don't even want to mention that they're even happening in the Western media, which is really strange here. And 21 Russian cities cancel V-Day parade as tit-for-tat drone wars heat up. This is Zero Hedge here as well. So, there's a whole pattern. And Bryansk, 2 trains, Mike, were just attacked and derailed with IEDs. This is the Bryansk region just over the border in Russia, on the Russian side, northern Ukraine. So, I mean, and not only that, in this other attack here, Belgorod, 4 civilians killed in a drone kamikaze attack. Just, I believe, in the last 2 weeks. That plus the shelling of civilians in Donetsk, in Donbass. So, I mean, that's what's actually happening. So, how is Russia going to take this? Is this going to strengthen their resolve, Mike? Or are they going to, cower back, or are they going to push? Is it going to motivate them to go forward?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that. I think they've got a fairly fixed plan. I'm not sure that any event is going to really change that, but they're certainly not going to take a step back.
Yeah. So I wonder, Mike, and the other question before we leave this topic, Mike, if the U.S. doesn't know, because we saw from the intelligence leaks before that they did talk the Kiev out of an attack in Rostov because it would look bad for their public relations. And so that was intercepted intelligence the U.S. said it had. So the U.S. must know these things are happening, so including the Kremlin drone attack. So the question, did they know and not say anything, or do they not know and have no control over Kiev? 2 fundamental questions, both of them equally as frightening if you consider the ramifications of a head of state getting killed in a drone attack, assassination attack. Where would that lead? World wars have been started over such things. Indeed. So, and just quickly here, so Germany is also feeling the heat. Here's Olaf Scholz with the T-shirt guy, and this is what Scholz is saying. Well, it's important for us that weapons we supply to Ukraine to defend itself aren't used to attack in Russian territory. So he's drawing a red line there, Olaf Scholz. Major weapons to Ukraine risks NATO becoming a, quote, party to the conflict. I think, well, they're already a party to the conflict. That's German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. And let's just take a look here. Britain and others are ribbing Germany that they're not doing enough. They're not sending enough aid and weapons to Ukraine. Here's the statistics right here. This is from the International Institute for World Economy, and they're saying this is government support to Ukraine. You see the United States way out front there in the billions, and Germany is second, and the UK is third, I believe. Yes, and France fourth. So actually, Germany is the second biggest supporter of Ukraine. So I think that's an important point to underline, because it seems like they're all ganging up on Germany. They're not doing enough to support the regime in Kiev.
Yes. Okay, thanks for that. Now, Vanessa, let's move to Syria. And, well, there's been a visit this week.
President Raisi of Iran. This is the first time that an Iranian president has visited Syria for 13 years, so 1 year before the regime change war started against Syria. Speaking to Sayed Mohammad Marandi, who's actually one of the chief advisors on the delegation, He told me that the economic cooperation between Syria and Iran has to some degree been neglected for many reasons, of course, one of which Iran has also been under sanctions. But Iran has now basically reached a point where it's dealing with the sanctions. And actually, as Mohammed said to me, Iran doesn't care about sanctions. So it's a momentous occasion. It was seen very much by local authorities and local officials as a strategic victory for both President Assad, Syria, and Iran. And if we look at the memorandum of cooperation that was agreed upon by the two presidents, if you just move forward, so they signed a memorandum of understanding for a comprehensive long-term strategic partnership plan between the two countries, which includes agricultural cooperation. When I was in Iran back in February, it was fascinating to see the number of projects that are ongoing for farming, for agriculture, and now there appears to be this growing cooperation. Rail network cooperation, again, interesting, similar to the Belt and Road Initiative, potential for rebuilding and building new rail networks from Iran to Syria and throughout the region. Mutual recognition of maritime certificates between the two countries. And it's been confirmed sort of in the last 24 hours that basically there is, of course, an agreement on military development, and that includes air defense systems similar to or a little bit more advanced than the Russian S-300s. So then also civil aviation development between the two countries, oil and energy resource cooperation. Of course, Iran has really been the big stopgap for Syria, with the United States occupying the northeast and the majority of Syrian vital resources, including oil, communications and information technology partnerships, and a memorandum of understanding between the National Earthquake Center in Syria and the International Institute for Seismic Engineering in Iran, addressing the issue of the recent earthquakes back in February and how to react to them if they're going to happen again in the future. Here again, you have the president's meeting. And I have to say, there was a public outpouring of support for the arrival of President Raisi and his delegation, high-level delegation. And after the Businessman Forum in Damascus, just moving on, Mike, or during the Businessman Forum in Damascus, Raisi basically stated that the Iranian people and Iranian officials have always stood by the Syrian people. Several decisions were taken in the last meeting with President Bashar al-Assad. 15 documents were signed between Tehran and Damascus. The joint meetings between Syria and Iran are useful for implementing the agreements between the two countries, and it has been agreed that they will continue with regular meetings in the future. Iran has turned the sanctions against Iran into opportunities, and there is no reason that Syria cannot do the same, particularly with the help of partners like Iran, Russia, China. This visit will constitute a positive turning point to develop the relations between the two countries. The impact of this visit will impact on the economic relations between the two countries and the region as a whole. Interesting statement there, and the region as a whole. And then let's look at the history, which is sort of being repeated here with this meeting. The late President Hafez al-Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad, was asked, why did you ally with Iran against Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq war? And he replied very portentously, as you can see, just for history, the day will come when Iran will defend us, or you, at a time when the Arabs will be plunging their daggers into the chests of the Syrians. So very important two-day meeting. And what was Israel's response? Well, it didn't come after the meetings, it came before. So this was the first attack, I think, towards the end of April. This was in Homs, where they targeted a civilian fuel center and trucks and fuel tankers and warehouses, again impacting on the scarce energy availability for civilians inside Syria.
So let's have a look at that.
كبير. يا ساتر. بيضربوا هون. خليه يطفوا الملتي، خليه يطفوا الملتي. لا لا لا، ما له علاقة، ما له علاقة. على الضوء ما له علاقة. والله على الضوء يا أخي. ما له علاقة خلاص. ما له علاقة خلاص. روق. صاير. بعيد.
You any idea what they were saying there, Vanessa?
No, I mean, basically, they're just talking about moving away from the area. I didn't get all of it. My Arabic is not that good. And so basically, it was April the 29th at 10 minutes before 1 in the morning. Israeli enemy carried out an air attack with several missiles from northern Lebanon, targeting points on the outskirts of Homs city. Air defenses, of course, intercepted some of the missiles, but some of them hit target, resulting in the injury of 3 civilians and the destruction of civilian gas station, trucks, and tankers. So, as I said, this is another attack on essential civilian supplies inside Syria. And then on 23:35 on May the 1st, so just before the arrival of President Raisi, Israeli warplanes fired 2 waves of missiles from over the Mediterranean Sea, targeting Aleppo International Airport, Al-Naira Military Airport, the scientific research facility, and military factories of the Defense Ministry in As-Safira, east of Aleppo. And Aleppo Airport was temporarily closed down. I was also told that a number of humanitarian relief store and warehouses were hit, either accidentally or deliberately. But anyway, the shutting down again of the humanitarian lifeline for the victims of the earthquake back in February that are still homeless and still largely reliant on foreign aid coming in. So this was the Israeli reaction prior to the meeting. We haven't had any attacks since the meeting or during the meeting. Of course, Israel isn't quite that stupid. But obviously, the Israeli aggression was discussed during the meeting. We haven't been told what was said on that yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Vanessa, did they fire from Lebanese airspace when they did? So they used Lebanese airspace to hit targets in Syria.
Yeah.
Yes, and the other point that we should make, Vanessa, is that by targeting sort of energy infrastructure, the airport as well, but the first attack was energy infrastructure. This is on top of that is a direct attack on any idea of humanitarianism because there's such a shortage of oil, shortage of fuel, shortage of electricity. This absolutely impacts civilian lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a regular occurrence, not only by Israel, but also by the armed groups, by ISIS, of course, which is under the control of the US. They will regularly attack the meager convoys or oil that are allowed to Damascus, for example. So yes, it's a constant battle against the Syrian civilians to prevent them receiving any energy resources at all.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Brutal, absolutely brutal. And,
yes.
And it's happening almost every day, attacks from Israel, which nobody talks about anymore because they're just so regular.
Well, indeed.
So we'll move on. Now, last week, Mike, we covered the Nord Stream pipeline investigation by French journalist Freddie Ponton. And part 2 of that investigation has come out. And I have to say, it's pretty incredible. The evidence, it's a lot more focused, and it identifies the actual components of the mission. Here's the article. We'll put that up on screen. Part 2, Smoking Guns, Nord Stream Sabotage, Secret Teams Revealed. This is an article at 21st Century Wire by Freddie Ponton. And if we go and look at this article, it's pretty incredible, the level of detail, but also the really specific in all of the different components of this mission. So he's identified all of the actual equipment, the teams, the diving teams, the components, put them at bow tops with photographic evidence as well. And we have AIS transponder, open source data as well that corroborates some of this. and also different components that would only be possible in this particular environment at that depth, and also the involvement of the oil and gas industry and the military in what's called dual-use technology. So this is an incredibly detailed report. Great job by Freddie Ponton, and we're going to bring him on to the program to talk about this investigation. I think we have him on the live link. Let's bring him up if possible. Hello, Freddie. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm not sure if you can hear me, guys.
Yeah, loud and clear. Yeah, we got a good
Fantastic.
signal. Freddie, incredible report. We want to give you a chance to go through this and just explain exactly, really prioritize what's here. What are the smoking guns? And we'll also be able to offer some visuals as well, and also give you a chance to just explain what's the most explosive findings that you found so far in this investigation. But we'll bring on here just to start, just to review what we showed last week, the means, the motive, and the opportunity. We went through all of these points: the divers in Panama City, NATO's Baltop drill as cover, the sonar buoys that were dropped later and for detonation, Norway's involvement in the mission, and also the U.S. and Norway cornering the gas market into Northern Europe. And so you've taken it another level now. We'll just update this. We now have the diving teams, which you'll talk about, in Baltops, and then also the Norwegian class ship that was there, mission capable for all of the components to do this job at that depth. And also the NATO Special Submarine Rescue Systems. We'll talk about that as well at Baltops. And you have the open source data for the P-8 Poseidon, U.S. Boeing Poseidon, dropping the sonar buoy 2 days before the explosion in September, exactly as Seymour Hersh had reported in his February 8th article on Substack. You've got that information there. And also the EU's Green Deal hydrogen industry, the absolute mapping of the future of the European energy market to comply with net zero and UN Sustainable Development and Paris Accord standards. That is all in the offing in this report, Freddie. So just give us an introduction, Freddie. Tell us about this. How is this report different from the first one?
Well, thank you very much, Patrick. Well, actually, part two of this investigation was really about the operational aspect of what is, according to Seymour Hersh's report, a CIA-led operation which was conducted during the NATO naval exercise known as Baltop 22, Patrick. So the idea was really, first of all, to identify possible NATO member states who, from what we can tell, would have provided logistical and intelligence, but also operational support to the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage. So we truly focused our investigation on various diverse teams from different countries that are attached to the NATO mine countermeasures task group known as MCM-TG. So these guys really participated in exercises, multiple exercises, and ranging really from explosive ordnance disposal, but also improvised explosive devices. But also they got involved. We were able to see that they were also involved in the handling and operating of unmanned underwater vehicle known as UUV. And then we found out later on that they were also carrying out decompression exercises and submarine medical rescue exercises during Baltop 22. So all in all, Patrick, is these logistics, but also this training, of course, are very auspicious and represented for us what we can tell a great opportunity to provide a cover for the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines.
And we'll just put back up on screen. You have a montage here of different diving teams. So we have U.S. Navy diving teams, SEALs, as well as Royal Danish Navy. And the U.K. also has special diving teams just for this particular type of job, correct?
That is absolutely correct. You know, they're very well equipped. But again, really the essence of this job is really cooperations and several member NATO states really bringing equipment, skills, and expertise to the scene.
And then as far as the ship that helped to carry out this, now Seymour Hersh said it was a Norwegian minesweeper. if I'm not mistaken. And you have narrowed that search down to a likely candidate. We're not saying that we know for sure, but in terms of where it is, its position, the timing, its capability, this is a Norwegian Ron-class patrol vessel. Tag is A537. According to your report, Freddie, this is one of the most capable vehicles, and you can place it at the scene of the crime?
Well, there's more than one. I mean, we obviously are releasing the information in a very small amount, not to overwhelm the public with too many informations. But really, we went after the diving teams, and that's how we actually found some of the vessels. So it's only one of them. There's many others, but we really can place the relevant mission-capable military ship that are, obviously taking on board specialist diving teams that are in position to conduct an explosive and a sabotage, if you will. So you get on one side a U.S. explosive ordnance disposal mobile unit, which we talked about in part one, known as EODMU-8, and others as well, squadrons. And then we have also the Royal Danish Navy divers assigned to NATO Mine Countermeasures Task Group, which and we can see them really exercising alongside the Norwegian Ren-class patrol vessel known as Magnus Lagabøte. So these are really divers that we believe to be part of a pre-deployment team, scouting the mission perimeter and preparing and marking the site where these explosive charges needed to be laid. So bear in mind that this is an ongoing investigation. So we will also have to unpack other events that took place, not only on the 8th of June, but when we saw this exercise from the Danish Navy and the US Navy, but also 15th of June, you had a 6 hours dive involving the Mine Countermeasures Task Group. Again, the US and the Danish guys are there. And then we also will have to look at really this multi-dive operation starting really at the 8th of June all the way even in August. We have some events taking place and on until the explosion time. So this is really interesting because it helps us shaping up this investigation, Patrick.
And one of the other things is NATO's Special Submarine Rescue Project, which has just come online really in the last year or two. And this makes this mission possible. And this is an important component, isn't it, Freddie? Explain why. Because this isn't just about divers jumping off the side of a boat, planting some C4, and then swimming back to the surface. You're talking about getting through the concrete casing of the pipelines. You need all sorts of equipment. This is a long job. This means you have multiple teams possibly being rotated to the surface and down to the floor as well. This is a sophisticated job. But go ahead and explain this, and we'll play the video in the background as you talk, Freddie, of one of these from Forum Energy Technologies, the Rescue Submarine Action. This is NATO approved. This is a NATO contract. But just take us quickly through this part of the story.
I'll try this. It's complex topics, but yes, the NATO Submarine Rescue System, Patrick, is a NATO program sponsored by the UK Department of Defense, and it truly belongs to the UK, to the Norwegian and the French. And it's really basically a mini sub which was developed by a company called FET based out of the UK. I mean, they're a global operation, and it's operated by John Fisher Defence Group of the UK as well. And what we found is that the DTXG, this new special operation diving squadron from the British Royal Navy, actually are the one that operates this submarine rescue system. And we can see that they've been training with the Norwegian Coast Guard, for example. And these guys have been reporting as well, the Norwegian using this particular submarine during NATO Baltop exercise. So we were not only suspecting, but expecting to see the presence of these NATO submarine rescue systems. And what I would add just to finalize this topic is that we were talking about dry combat submersible and the ability for repressurizing the entire hyperbaric space within the dry combat submersible. So we saw US SOCOM, the Special Operation Command of the US Navy, investing money and time in trying to identify, even to the point of a commissioning a comparative study, to see whether this was possible or not, because you can start basically the decompression process, during the missions, and you gain a lot of time. But we lost kind of our track with the fundings, and it went what I would say dark as a funding. So we would assume that for a layer of security, a layer of the one go, if you will, extractions of the diving team to be placed in the recompression chambers on board of the mothership, then I think it makes sense for these guys to be there, and it's well explained in the article.
Yeah, and the project went dark, so possibly went under classified status right before Baltops.
That's
Very interesting find, Freddie. And now for the Poseidon. So Seymour Hersh said that a P-8 was dropped there over this site afterwards, 2 days before in September. And so we have the open source data. We'll credit MonkeyWorks for providing the open source data. But just explain very quickly, Freddie, what we're looking at here.
Well, first of all, the P-8A Poseidon is delivering a sonar buoy, according to Seymour Hersh. Now, the sonar buoy is an expandable sonar system that is really dropped or ejected, I would say, out of a plane. And then the buoy is equipped to detect underwater sounds and basically has the ability to transmit a signal via radio. So the P-8 can take up to 124 sonar buoy on board. And we know that looking at the specs of this flight, it has undergone quite a significant design modification that allowed him to carry out missions, what I call low altitude missions. So it's very interesting, this plane indeed. And as you mentioned, MonkeyWorks has done a fantastic job at showing with open data source that we were able to track different Poseidon around the world.
Just briefly, sorry, Freddie. We're looking at the air refueling over the U.S. base, I believe, in Germany or Poland, and then the plane is coming back to Bornholm Island, exactly where the spot is of the Nord Stream pipeline, drops the buoy, and then heads westward via Iceland. And this is all on the open source data. So this pretty much matches up, doesn't it, with Seymour Hersh's article?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So that's the sonar buoy, and then Freddie. Now, lastly, on one of the main points of this article is the energy question. So blue and green hydrogen, who benefits? So this is a much bigger story, isn't it? This is about the future. So Nord Stream is just a piece of a bigger story, is what you're saying. Go ahead and quickly explain this to us. We just have a minute or two left.
Yeah, obviously we saw the kind of excitement just after on the back of the explosion on the 26th of September. So we got the Polish and the Norwegians basically been very excited, and we starting to track down with an investigation a little bit the background and the long-term project coming out of Europe, and we can really identify Norway, Germany being very involved in a major hydrogen project. So there's a complete ongoing investment into the Southern Barents Sea and other blocks that belongs to Norway, which will provide basically this gas that is so necessary for hydrogen project. So what they have in mind is basically a green hydrogen project. That's the long-term program, but they initially will start with a blue hydrogen program. So I'm not going to describe what it is. Go into the article and you see exactly what it's about. But what's important to see is that there's a real complete reshaping of not only the gas market, but the hydrogen market and the electricity grids that accompany this kind of strategy and energy strategy. So it's very important to see that Norway, Denmark, Germany, and Poland, as all countries benefiting really from the cancellation of the Nord Stream pipeline, Patrick.
And it's all totally in line with World Economic Forum, the sort of things that they want to see, the transformation in Europe that they want to see going forward into their fourth industrial revolution. Lastly, Freddie, what do you make of these reports from the Danish media about a Russian ship? Apparently they have photos, but they won't show them, of a Russian ship that was in this busy shipping lane. They say that it was there 4 days before the explosion. Here's the BBC opining on this as well. Nord Stream report puts Russian Navy ships near pipeline blast site. This suddenly appears, this information after all this time from Danish intelligence. What do you make of this story?
Well, it's again, this has to be part of the warfare on informations. If you have NATO member states conducting basically an act of terrorism, which is nothing else than an act of war on other NATO member states, you get a huge problem in your hands. So you got to come up with any kind of story that's going to be able to counteract the efforts, not only Seymour Hersh's, but my efforts and many other people's efforts to trying to prove that this was indeed a US-led effort, but also had a lot of help from NATO member states. And as far as the submarine and the submersible, the Russian submersible, I think I found it. And if you look on the backdrop of your video, you'll see it is laying down just behind Mike there. I think it's a blue and red submarine, so we'll find it there, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Somewhere in Plymouth Harbor, right?
Yes, indeed.
Well spotted, Freddie. I appreciate you. He's watching Plymouth very closely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Listen, Freddie, all jokes aside, this is an incredible piece of investigative journalism. We really appreciate your hard work on this, and we look forward to, it's an ongoing investigation. I know you're doing more work on this, and we'll try our best to report on what you find when you find it.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on then. If you like what the UK column does, you'd like to support us, please head over to community.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us out there, or you can pick something up at the UK Column shop. But please do share anything you find on the various platforms, especially on ukcolumn.org itself. Now, we're going to come back to the interview that Nigel Farage did with Hamish de Bretton Gordon, because they began talking about China. Let's just have a listen to this.
But Hamish, I just wonder about this war. A very interesting comment overnight I've seen from Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running to be the Republican nominee. Now, he's not going to win, but he's a very intelligent young man. And he's made a point overnight, and it's been on my mind. He's basically saying that Putin has now become China's proxy. We've driven Putin, or he's driven himself, into the arms of China, and that effectively what China want is for Putin to continue this war as long as possible, to exhaust those that are backing Ukraine in terms of munitions, and goodness me, we're down to just a few thousand artillery shells in this country as we speak, and that this is all somehow a cover for China to invade Taiwan. What do you make of that theory? And do you feel, as I do, that increasingly Putin frankly can't move or do anything without the Chinese saying yes?
Well, Nigel, I agree. It's a really complex situation. The Chinese are definitely playing a role here. But the fact that they're not arming the Russians, I think that is probably a significant thing. I agree that, the Chinese, it sort of gives them a red light to invade Taiwan if they see fit. But also, you'll know far better than me, I expect, that China is so reliant on the US economy, on the European economy and the British economy to keep its strange brand of communism going, that it has, it doesn't want to see the death of those. I also agree with you that Putin is trying to draw this war out as long as possible, throwing the young men of Russia into the meat grinder so that the US in particular start to lose faith in the Ukrainians, stop giving them the weaponry they need. And of course, again, with the US and the UK having elections coming up in 12 months, politicians here and over the water are looking that way. That's why it's so important that we enable Ukraine to get this over with as quickly as possible. And I'm confident if we give them the ammunition that they're short of at the moment, we've already given them the tanks and everything else, that they can prevail. But you're right, China is where we really need to be focusing once Russia is sort of out of the game, which I hope they will be soon.
Okay, so I'm just going to say, Vanessa had her head in her hands for most of that, and we'll get some thoughts from Vanessa in a second. But I just want to break this down a little bit. Let's look at what he had to say, because everything that he said was 180 degrees out. It began with this comment: the Ukraine war gives China a red light to invade Taiwan. Well, of course, you don't say that means that they're not going to invade. You would say it gives them a green light. So he's got that 180 degrees out, first of all, right?
Red.
So second of all, China is reliant on the US, EU, and British economy. Well, that's really an interesting statement, because just on Sunday, this past Sunday, The chief executive of Mercedes-Benz gave this to one of the German Sundays. He said, the major players in the global economy, Europe, the US, and China, are so closely intertwined that disengaging from China makes no sense. This is for the Germans. That would be unthinkable for almost the entire German industry. He was absolutely saying 100% that in fact it's German industry, EU industry, British, US industry that is reliant on China just as much, if not more, in fact, much more than the Chinese economy is reliant on us. Anyway, Hamish de Bretton Gordon went on to say that Putin is throwing the young men of Russia into the meat grinder so that the US starts to lose faith and stop giving them weapons. Of course, it's not the Russian troops that are in the meat grinder at this point. It's the Ukrainian troops that talk about the meat grinder and so on.
So total propaganda.
Total propaganda. But the key point that he wanted to make was bomb China. That's basically what it boils down to. That's what he's calling for. So we've got Hamish de Bretton Gordon. We might say that we wouldn't expect anything other than that type of rhetoric from him. But frankly, Nigel Farage is clearly GB News' chief war propagandist now, because he's calling for, in this interview, conflict with China. He's not asking for cool heads and common sense here.
He's sounding like a Fox News neocon pundit. I mean,
yes.
He slipped into that role.
Well, he has, because of course he just spent the last couple of days with Donald Trump. So he's absolutely swimming in those seas.
Talk tough, look tough. No, so what they're saying is the domino effect. This is just a rehash of the Cold War. That if we don't stop communism in Laos, it's going to spread to Vietnam. So that sort of crazy thinking is what got the U.S. bogged down in Vietnam for 10 years, a total disaster. So what they've done is just recreate this binary, democracy versus authoritarianism. If we don't stop Putin in Ukraine, he's going to steamroll to the Atlantic over Europe, and then he's going to give the green light, not the red light, sorry, to China, and they're going to. So look, if you ask the average European, Mike, you ask, if China took Taiwan over, would that change your life at all as a European? Does that have any effect on your day-to-day life? The answer is no. The only difference in the United States is they're so heavily propagandized that this is somehow a red line and it can never be crossed, and Taiwan is a sacrosanct, embryonic democratic project, must be protected at all costs, even World War III. I mean, total propaganda. We're saturated in these fake propaganda narratives. It's unbelievable.
Vanessa, I'd be interested to get some thoughts from you.
Oh, I mean, it's just pure comedy. I couldn't even watch it. I mean, it's gobbledygook. And anyone that is watching this and thinking that it is salient, intelligent analysis, it needs their head examining. We're going to war on the word of, or on the analysis. Oh, God. I mean, it just takes Orientalism into another whole realm.
Yes.
China's weird, China's strange brand of communism. I mean, sorry.
Yes, I know. I understand.
We're a lot more communist in Europe and Britain than China is.
I think that's absolutely right
at the moment. But look, victory's right around the corner. Victories. We just need to send a little more a few more weapons, a few more rounds, and they'll be marching through the Arc de Triomphe. Marching on Red Square? Is Kiev going to march victoriously through Red Square? I mean, what are they talking about, honestly?
Indeed. Okay, Vanessa, let's move back to the Middle East then, and recent GCC meeting.
Yeah, I mean, this was on the 1st of May, so just before President Raisi's visit to Syria. There's a lot going on in Syria, and it has kind of ramifications really globally far more than before, or far more obviously than before. So this was a continuation of the last consultative meeting of the GCC countries, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt, that was held in Jeddah. The foreign ministers of Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt met in Amman, Jordan. And part of the discussions were, of course, the admission of President, or rather Syria, back to the Arab League and the normalization of relations with President Assad. And then at the same time, so while this was going on in Jordan, a meeting between Zhai Jun, special envoy of the Chinese government on Middle East affairs, was going on in Damascus, the same palace where President Assad met President Raisi of Iran. And the very strong message from President Assad during that meeting was that it was necessary to abandon the US dollar in trade and to pivot towards the Chinese yuan. What is very interesting now is Assad's involvement on a much wider range of issues globally. And interesting schism, as I see it, between US response to the normalization of relations with President Assad by many of their allies, including Saudi Arabia. Egypt is very much perceived as an ally of the US. Jordan is, let's say, it's a little bit positive compared to the rhetoric of US officials prior to February this year. Actually, from the earthquake onwards, these changes started to take place. So the US is encouraged that the Arab-Syria meeting in Amman emphasized shared priorities. The White House tells The National that it hopes the Assad regime, rather government, follows through on commitments, but US is wary of normalization push. But then having a look at a couple of the comments in there, so President Joe Biden's administration said again it was encouraged after an Arab meeting in Amman to discuss normalizing ties with Damascus. Again, despite US opposition to bringing President Bashar al-Assad back into the fold. And then going down to the third paragraph, a White House National Security Council representative told The National the Biden administration, again, using the word encouraged, to see the joint communique mention many priorities that we and our partners share. Interesting language here, and going on again, if we look at what National Security Council spokesman John Kirby had told reporters last month, nothing's changed about our desire not to see anybody normalizing relations with Assad. We don't believe that's in anybody's interest in the region or beyond. But as Washington's Arab partners began engaging more with the Assad government, senior administration official Barbara Leaf expressed a softer tone. Our approach on that score is that we make sure, this is very important, that we get something for that engagement. Typical US policy here, absolutely no negotiation, absolutely no collaboration, cooperation, or partnership, only what they get out of it. And then let's look at what the UK are doing. Now, bear in mind, in 2017, when President Trump wanted to withdraw US troops from Syria, what happened? UK media, led by The Guardian and The Times, were very critical of his announcement. And a few days later, the Khan Sheikhoun chemical attack, or alleged attack, was carried out by the White Helmet organization that is predominantly funded by the UK FCO. So here we have Lord Tariq Ahmed of Wimbledon, who I have to say has a history throughout the regime change war against Syria of obfuscating the role of the British government in the sponsorship, equipping, and promotion of the armed groups, including some of the most brutal, like Jaish al-Islam, al-Sham, and al-Qaeda affiliates. So this was on, I think, the 28th of April. So yesterday he welcomed the Syrian task force at the UK Foreign Office, and they hosted a panel to discuss the continued need for accountability in Syria, so doubling down on the accountability narrative, doubling down on the hybrid war pressure against Syria, including sanctions. A selection of Caesar photos were displayed showing the brutality of the Syrian regime. Their behavior has not changed. Very important language used here. Who is Lord Tariq Ahmed of Wimbledon? Well, here is his Twitter profile. I don't really need to say much about the photos there. Minister of State, Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs, South Asia, ME East, North Africa, MENA, UN, Human Rights, PM's Special Envoy for Preventing Sexual Violence. Moving on. So if we look at the meeting that he held, here you have in the center of two characters wearing balaclavas, very strange attire to appear in the Foreign Office. You have Moaz Mustafa in the middle, who was responsible for bringing McCain to Syria in 2013 and introducing him to a number of terrorist operatives, including the leader or the alleged leader of ISIS at the time. So he's had an instrumental role in running the narratives against Syria since 2011. And then let's have a look at Lord Ahmed's statement. The Syrian people have endured unimaginable suffering, while the propaganda merchants of Damascus, Moscow, and Tehran, ultimate irony there, seek to rewrite history. The evidence we can see and hear today underlines where responsibility for these abuses principally lies with the Assad regime and its allies, Russia and Iran. I have to say, if people want to look up what the Caesar documents are, there's a forensic investigation by journalist Rick Sterling that's available online. Just put in a search for Rick Sterling and Caesar, you'll find it, discrediting it. Most recently, the UK acted swiftly to respond to the devastating earthquakes of 6th of February, increasing support to our partners. Now, the partners, of course, are effectively Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups in the northwest in Idlib, supported by the White Helmets, which is of course, an entity created by UK intelligence agencies. And we were able to provide a package of support worth more than 43 million. Well, that 43 million did not come into central Syria, of course. It went to the northwest corner, which is dominated by Al-Qaeda. The UK also uses our position in the Human Rights Council and at the Security Council to highlight the scale of human rights abuses in Syria. We will not let up. So that gives you an idea of what UK foreign policy is compared to US. And this is a response from Peter Ford. Many people will already know him, former UK ambassador to Syria. And I also have to note that if people were writing to their MPs and requesting that sanctions be lifted on Syria, the round-robin copy-paste reply that they would have got came from Lord Ahmed. So here Peter says, how good to hear that the Foreign Office is calling for accountability over all the war crimes committed in Syria. So can we now look forward to the FCO referring itself to the International Criminal Court for all the crimes it has committed against the Syrian people, such as support for terrorism? How appropriate that the stooges on stage with Lord Ahmed were fully masked up. Well done, Foreign Office. Such as targeting civilian populations with scattergun sanctions, some of the most vicious being precisely the Caesar variety celebrated by Lord Ahmed, such as working to prevent reconstruction in war and now earthquake-damaged Syria. And he went on. Seriously, is this what it has come to for the Foreign Office, seeing its policy of isolating Syria collapsing around its ears, putting on pathetic stunts about accountability when the Arab world is queuing up to normalize relations with Syria? Guys, you are just talking to yourselves. The world has moved on. Syria has stood defiant in the face of all your bullying and stands now on the edge of a remarkable recovery. Swallow your bile, Foreign Office. Stop being bad losers. Cut your losses by asking Syria for kind permission to reopen the embassy I used proudly to head. Strong words from Peter Ford and very necessary, I think.
Yes. Thoughts?
No, I think that pretty much says it all.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you very much. Now let's just move to Sudan briefly. An update from the British government yesterday on the evacuation. So they claim that the UK has completed its evacuation operation in Sudan, airlifting 2,450 people to safety. Thank you to all those involved. They say we're pressing for a ceasefire to bring about a permanent end to the violence and enable the delivery of humanitarian assistance to Sudan. Well, they may claim that they're pressing for a ceasefire, but in the meantime, in the United States, Joe Biden has decided that sanctions are the right way to go. So he has issued an executive order signed yesterday authorizing future sanctions. Now, the sanctions, the details of the sanctions are not yet public, so we don't know what is going to be imposed. But he said the war in Sudan is an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. Do they have intercontinental ballistic missiles, Patrick?
Who?
Sudan.
Not that I know of.
So could you explain how this is a threat to U.S. national security and foreign policy? Well, okay, maybe if they're worried about what Russia and China are doing in North Africa, then they might view it that way. But anyway, he went on to say the Sudanese people suffered 30 years under an authoritarian regime. There's that word again. But they never gave up on their commitment to democracy or their hope for a better future. Their dedication brought down a dictator only to endure a military takeover in October 2021, and now more violence among factions fighting for control. Well, in fact, there was a ceasefire announced yesterday, a 7-day ceasefire yesterday. Now, apparently, it's not 100%, but that was announced yesterday nonetheless. So the situation in Sudan rumbles on. In the meantime, the question in North Africa and the Sahel region of Africa in particular, of Russia's influence there and China's influence there, well, we get another clue because here's Ibrahim Traoré, who's the interim president of Burkina Faso, very satisfied with their military cooperation with Russia. And besides, Burkina Faso's cooperation with Russia dates back a long time, and we're wanting to develop it further and move it on. So more and more North African countries aligning themselves towards the east rather than the west. I suspect, Patrick, that what we will just see, as Vanessa has mentioned on several occasions over recent weeks and months, is more and more destabilization in that region.
Absolutely.
Okay, hate speech. Well, Alex was talking a little about this legislation in Ireland on Wednesday's program, but you've got an update?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you guys kicked that off on Wednesday, but this is just an unbelievable piece of, as you know,
yes,
an unbelievable, egregious piece of legislation. There's Leo Varadkar himself. So the hate speech consultation, they did kind of like with the online harms in the UK, an open consultation. The public weighed in, Mike. Let's look at what the public said in Ireland about this crazy new hate speech legislation here. And I'm going to direct people to an excellent Irish blogger. His name is Keith Woods. You should be following him on Twitter for updates on this and other stories about what's going on in the Republic of Ireland. He says, here's your liberal democracy. 73% of the respondents to this online consultation, to the government's consultation on hate speech, the laws were opposed to the laws. So this follows polls earlier this year that found that only 19% of the public wanted hate speech laws. So that's according to an RTE poll we'll show you in a minute. But despite this, almost 90% of the elected members of the Irish Parliament voted for this legislation. And so let's look at that for a minute. So as Keith has said, there's the poll, Mike. That was March 2022. Only 19% support such laws. That's RTE, so that's a mainline BBC equivalent in Ireland here. And here is the vote. There it is. 110 for, 14 against. Pretty incredible.
That's in the Dáil, so that's Irish MPs.
So it's the lower house, right?
Yes.
So what does that tell you? We have this conversation before about the parliamentary party and then the public.
Well, what it tells us is that the idea of a representative democracy is turned on its head because the MPs, the politicians, are representing the policy to the people. They're not representing the people's opinion about the policy. So if they were representing people's opinion, 90% of those MPs would have rejected this legislation.
So they're quietly voting that way. But what happens, Mike, when leading ministers come up and hold the public in total contempt of their views? Let's look at this clip from Leo Varadkar. We've got for you loaded up, but go ahead and roll this.
Taoiseach, your government conducted a public consultation regarding hate speech laws where citizens were asked to give their thoughts on the issue, and out of the thousands of responses from private individuals, over 70% were not supportive of such laws, and yet you're proceeding with them anyway. So my question is, why did your government bother to do a public consultation if you were just going to ignore the results?
Well, we do public consultations because we think they're good practice. It's a way to find out what people's thoughts are on issues, and it's also a way to flesh out and highlight some of the issues that we may not have considered. But we're also wise to the fact that the vast majority of people don't make submissions to public consultations. We have to bear that in mind. It's only a small portion of the population that participate in these things, so it's not necessarily reflective of public opinion. And also we're wise to the fact that very often submissions are organised, and campaign groups will organise responses, so we're clear with that too.
But why hold the consultation if the end result is just going to be disregarded on the basis that it's not representative of public opinion? What's the point of it then?
Well, the point is that we're a democracy, and in Ireland we have elections, and decisions are made by the government and the elected parliament. They're not made unfunded public consultations or opinion polls. That's not what they're about. They're about testing the temperature.
So is it just for show then?
No.
So we don't want a referendum on a constitution in the EU. Public votes against it. So we'll just hold it again, and we'll just keep holding it until we get the right answer. This is the same attitude.
Exactly the same thing. So there's Leo Varadkar. So he defends disregarding the results of this public consultation on hate speech, and he's arguing that these consultations are hijacked by campaigning groups. So, and they're not reflective of public opinion. So they're totally worthless, according to Leo Varadkar. I mean, it's so cynical.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. And I really, I feel for the people of Ireland that they have to endure this government.
Well, of course they don't have to, and it's about time the people of Ireland stood up and got rid of this crowd.
Well, they have a little problem in Ireland, Mike, that you might be familiar with. The amendment in 1959 to the Irish Constitution, what's it called? First past the post. It makes it kind of difficult to see the sweeping changes that we see in the houses in European parliaments, for instance.
Well, okay.
But that's one of the problems. It's a lock there with the three-party duopoly, you could say, in control of the Irish government there. Incredible.
Yep. Incredible. Okay, well, look, sticking on the censorship issue, let's bring this on screen now. In Utah in the United States, Pornhub, the pornography website, has decided to block access to users in Utah because the Utah state legislature is bringing legislation in which requires age verification before you can access adult websites. Now, if we look at the two sides of the argument on this, this is one, that pornography should not be available to children, and so we need to legislate to force companies to ensure that it's not available to children. The other side of the argument is it's parents' responsibility to police their children's use of the internet. So we'll talk about this a little bit in a second. So here is the legislation itself. Online pornography viewing age requirements. This is 23 general session, and the sponsor is Todd D. Weller. So that legislation is going through at the moment. This is all about age verification on adult websites. And I just want to remind everybody, of course, this is absolutely a key part of the UK's online safety bill. I've put it fourth on my list here, age verification. And where does this lead? It absolutely leads to digital ID. It can lead to no other destination. Now, if we see websites like Pornhub that many people use, no matter what you think about it, many people use these sites. If you see those types of websites starting to remove themselves from local internet, we're starting to see the balkanization of the internet, number one. If we start to see end-to-end encryption banned, as the online safety bill is arguing for, then we start to see Signal and WhatsApp and organizations like this starting to withdraw from local internet. And we start to see the balkanization of the internet. And if people don't want to see that, then there's going to be demand for some form of solution. And the solution, as I say, is going to be digital ID. Now, just as a comment on the pornography industry, I just want to remind everybody, back in 2014, the UK column came under attack from a little organization called ATVOD, the Authority for Television on Demand. So if you look at the first paragraph of this article, it says, last Wednesday, all video on demand content for which the UK column had editorial responsibility was removed from YouTube and this website, that's UK column website, following demands for regulation by ATVOD, a subsidiary of Ofcom. Now, we took them on this, but we also had quite a bit of communication from representatives of the pornography industry in the UK, because they had been in communications with ATVOD for quite a long time before we had, and their view was that ATVOD was attempting to regulate the entire internet. Now, ATVOD, of course, disappeared following its fight with us, and the responsibilities that it held were brought back into Ofcom. But the policy that ATVOD represented at that time hasn't gone away, and Ofcom is going to become the regulator of the entire internet. And we might not like, as individuals, what organizations like Pornhub do, but the fact is, if we are willing to accept legislation in order to put limitations on what these types of organizations can do, then we're shooting ourselves in the foot. At the beginning of that, I showed two sides to the argument. Parents might say, well, we can't watch what our kids are doing all the time. A very simple solution to this problem would be, if you want to legislate to make all adult websites operate under a top-level domain, let's say whatever, Pornhub.xxx, right? And then you legislate to make sure that the internet service providers provide a method for parents to simply switch off access to all XXX websites, and that would go a very long way to solving the problem. But neither the pornography industry nor governments want to do that, because of course pornography industry is being used as the sledgehammer for people, because a lot of people disagree with it and they're willing to accept the digital ID that comes along as a result of this. It's a very interesting conversation that needs to be had around this issue.
Well, you can do cable boxes used to do that with adult content, Mike. So if the access was restricted, you had to have, it was very much, you had to opt in, subscribe.
Yes.
It wasn't going on the same broadcast waves as everything else. So it's not like this is an impossible thing, but just like online harms, using the children harms angle in order to basically do a broad brush stroke and censorship. And I'm going to say the age verification thing is already being used to censor so much content on YouTube. If there's a video that YouTube doesn't want to be seen, they'll slap an age verification on it. So it's already being used. So the real danger here, Mike, is going to expand the use of this age verification roadblock, if you will, in order to make a lot of content invisible, including just political content that the establishment doesn't like, and they'll go and put pressure on YouTube and Google to shut that down. I might also add that Utah is dominated by Mormons, so very much and evangelical Christians. So that's the dominant political mode in that state. But this is just an incredibly dangerous, slippery slope. And I think you've made some really good suggestions there. I hope someone's listening in the decision-making decision, that the role that they can do something sensible on this.
Yes. Okay. Let's just end with this. So Newsweek has got this headline: How King Charles Overcame Scandal and Tragedy to Reach Coronation. Well, of course, he hasn't overcome scandal and tragedy at all. His Prince Harry is that whole thing is like an episode of the Kardashians. And as for his brother, Prince Andrew, I mean, that issue has not gone away, and so on. But I just wanted to end on this little point here, because the question is, why was the 6th of May chosen as the date of the coronation? Well, we should remember that, of course, this is the birthday of Artemis, the Greek god. Unfortunately, the Roman equivalent of Artemis is Diana. Now, people may find that as a coincidence that particular day was chosen. I'm a bit more cynical about that. I think that the day was very carefully chosen. There's a little message in there, and I just want to thank the person who sent that to me yesterday, because I thought that was just an interesting observation.
They do like their esoteric symbolism,
they absolutely
don't they?
Do. Yes. Okay, let's leave it there for today. I want to say thank you very much to Patrick, to Freddie, and to Vanessa for joining us today. We'll be back, Vanessa and I will be back for some extra in a couple of minutes' time. Patrick has another commitment, so we will see you in a few minutes if you're a UK Column member. Otherwise, have a great weekend, and we'll see you at 1 p.m. as usual on Monday. Bye-bye.